Courtrooms are meant to be places of justice, order, and closure. But when grief and rage collide, they can become scenes of chaos and raw emotion. Nowhere is this more evident than when grieving parents confront their child's killer, moments where pain erupts beyond control and the pursuit of justice turns personal. For parents who have lost a child, the courtroom is often their only chance to face the person responsible for their heartbreak. But sometimes, the weight of their loss becomes unbearable. Their anger, sorrow, and frustration, often suppressed through long trials, explode in shocking and unforgettable outbursts. From violent attacks to emotional breakdowns, these moments reveal the devastating cost of crime, the human suffering behind every verdict. They spark debates. Is this grief-driven revenge justified, or does it undermine the pursuit of justice? In this compilation, we revisit 10 of the most intense courtroom confrontations where parents, driven beyond reason by loss, lashed out at their child's killer. These moments are more than viral clips. They are windows into the agony of loss and the complex emotions that justice alone cannot resolve. Because behind every headline is a parent whose life was shattered and whose pain, for a moment, broke through the silence of the courtroom. Courtrooms are often seen as places of order and justice, where the law prevails and emotions are kept in check. But sometimes, the immense pain of loss breaks through the walls of civility, turning these chambers into scenes of raw, human emotion. For grieving parents, seeing the person who stole their child's life can unleash a rage that no legal sentence can suppress. In moments like these, the search for justice collides with the need for vengeance. Parents, consumed by heartbreak, lash out, sometimes violently, against those who caused their unimaginable suffering. These courtroom outbursts, caught on camera and replayed around the world, reveal the unbearable weight of grief and the thin line between justice and revenge. This is not about villains or heroes. It's about human beings at their breaking point. Parents who, after enduring the agony of loss, find themselves face to face with their child's killer, and in that moment, reason gives way to raw emotion. In this compilation, we will revisit 10 of the most shocking moments where parents, driven by pain and fury, attacked killers in the courtroom. Some of these cases made headlines for their sheer intensity, while others went viral for capturing the public's sympathy and outrage. From the father who shot his son's abuser on live television to the parents who charged at serial killers and school shooters, these moments spark a deep question. How far would you go for justice? But beyond the violence lies a deeper story, the story of loss, trauma, and the lasting scars that crimes leave behind. As we explore these cases, we invite you to look beyond the headlines and into the hearts of those forever changed by tragedy. Because when justice feels out of reach, grief finds its own turn. One of the most infamous cases of courtroom vengeance occurred in 1984, when Gary Plauché, a grieving father, shocked the nation by shooting his son's abuser on live television. Gary's son Jody had been kidnapped and abused by Jeff Doucet, a karate instructor the family once trusted. After a nationwide search, authorities found Jody and arrested Doucet. As the police escorted the handcuffed abuser through the airport, news cameras captured the scene live. But what happened next stunned everyone. From a nearby phone booth, Gary Plauché, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, suddenly turned and fired a single shot, killing Doucet instantly. The cameras rolled as the police tackled Gary to the ground. The chilling moment was broadcast to millions of viewers, leaving the nation divided. Some called it murder, while others saw it as a father's act of love and justice. The courtroom proceedings that followed were equally intense. Despite the gravity of his actions, Gary's case was met with unexpected sympathy. The judge, moved by Gary's grief and his clean record, sentenced him to just 7 years of probation and community service. No prison time. This case remains a powerful example of how far a parent's love and pain can drive them. But it also raises difficult questions. Was justice served that day, or was it lost in a moment of rage? Gary Plauché later spoke publicly, expressing both remorse and justification, stating, "I'm not proud of what I did, but I'd do it again if I had to." His story became a symbol of a parent's ultimate breaking point, a reminder that sometimes the fight for justice takes a deeply personal and emotional turn. In 2018, the world watched as the trial of Larry Nassar, the former USA gymnastics doctor, unfolded. Over 150 survivors came forward to confront Nassar for his horrific abuse, delivering victim impact statements that shook the courtroom. But one father's reaction became a defining moment of raw emotion and grief. Randall Margraves, the father of 3 daughters, 2 of whom had been abused by Nassar, stood before the judge after hearing his daughter's painful testimonies. His voice trembling with rage and heartbreak, he asked the judge for one simple request. "Could you give me 5 minutes alone with this demon?" When the judge denied the request, Margraves tried again. "How about 1 minute?" Suddenly, he charged toward Nassar, his anger exploding into action. Court officers tackled him to the ground as he yelled, "I want that son of a Bakee!" Gasps filled the courtroom as chaos briefly broke out. Nassar remained still, avoiding eye contact with the furious father. The judge, Rosemarie Aquilina, responded with compassion, acknowledging the deep pain driving Margraves's actions. She refused to punish him harshly for his outburst, understanding that his reaction came from a place of unimaginable grief. The moment went viral, sparking debates around the world. Some viewers praised Margraves for his bravery and raw expression of fatherly love. Others questioned whether violence, even in moments of deep pain, belonged in a courtroom. But beyond the headlines, the scene exposed the deeply human side of justice. The anguish of a parent who could not protect his children and whose only outlet became an act of unfiltered rage. In the end, Randall Margraves became a symbol of every parent's nightmare. The helplessness of witnessing their child's suffering and the desperate urge to make it right. In 1992, the trial of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer captivated the nation with its horror. Dahmer, who murdered and dismembered 17 young men and boys, sat emotionless as grieving families shared their pain. But one voice broke through the cold silence, the voice of Rita Isbell, sister of victim Errol Lindsay. When it was Rita's turn to give her victim impact statement, the room grew tense. She started calmly, addressing Dahmer directly. "Whatever your name is, Satan, I don't know how you did what you did." But as she spoke, her composure crumbled under the weight of her grief. Her voice rose, cracking with agony and rage. Suddenly, she lunged at Dahmer, screaming, "Jeffrey, I hate you! I'll kill you!" Security officers rushed to restrain her as her cries echoed through the courtroom. Dahmer, cold and expressionless, did not flinch. The outburst became one of the trial's most unforgettable moments. It wasn't just about rage. It was raw human suffering on display for the world to witness. The scene quickly spread across news broadcasts, igniting a public conversation about grief and justice. Many empathized with Rita, seeing in her breakdown the universal pain of loss. Some questioned whether victim impact statements, meant to humanize the trial process, instead exposed victims' families to further trauma. Years later, Rita reflected on that moment, saying that her outburst wasn't planned. It was pure emotion, built from months of heartbreak and horror. Her confrontation with Dahmer became more than a courtroom spectacle. It became a symbol of what violent crime leaves behind. Survivors whose wounds never fully heal and whose grief, when unleashed, can shake the walls of justice itself. In 2014, emotions ran high during the sentencing of Andrea Snyderman, who was convicted of perjury and hindering the investigation into the murder of her husband, Rusty Snyderman. Rusty had been gunned down outside his son's daycare by Andrea's former boss, Hemi Newman, in a crime that shocked the Atlanta community. As the trial unraveled a web of lies, betrayal, and manipulation, it became clear that the pain of Rusty's family ran far deeper than the courtroom could contain. During the sentencing hearing, as Andrea Snyderman prepared to address the court, Rusty's brother, Stephen Snyderman, could no longer hold back his emotions. Overwhelmed with anger and grief, he charged toward her, shouting accusations and demanding answers for his brother's death. Security quickly intervened, restraining him before he could reach her, but the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The judge immediately called for order, but the confrontation left a lasting impression. The outburst was not only about the loss of a loved one, but also the deep sense of betrayal the Snyderman family felt, believing that Andrea had manipulated the events that led to Rusty's murder. The emotional breakdown ignited public debate. Some felt sympathy for Stephen's anguish, recognizing that no courtroom procedure could ease his family's suffering. Others criticized the chaos, arguing that emotional outbursts, though understandable, disrupt the integrity of justice. Despite the courtroom tension, the moment served as a raw reminder of what trials often obscure: the human cost of crime. Behind every legal argument and piece of evidence are shattered families, struggling with loss and betrayal. For the Snydermans, the trial ended, but the grief and unanswered questions would haunt them far beyond the walls of the courtroom. In 2014, a dramatic and tragic scene unfolded in a courtroom in Nagpur, India. Faraz Khan, a grieving father, sought justice for his 17-year-old daughter who had been kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered. The accused, Imtiaz Ahmed, stood trial for the horrific crime. But before the court could deliver its verdict, justice took a sudden and violent turn. As the accused was brought into the courtroom for his hearing, tensions reached a breaking point. Faraz Khan, seething with grief and anger, suddenly lunged forward. Before anyone could react, he pulled out a knife and stabbed Ahmed repeatedly in front of the stunned judge, lawyers, and police officers. The attack was swift and fatal. Ahmed died on the courtroom floor. Chaos erupted as officers restrained Khan and cleared the courtroom. Witnesses described the scene as both horrifying and heartbreaking, a grieving father who had been pushed beyond the limits of his pain. The incident sparked an intense public debate. Many people sympathized with Khan, believing his actions stemmed from the unbearable anguish of losing his daughter and the frustration with a slow justice system. Supporters argued that his outburst was a cry against a system that often fails victims. However, others stressed that vigilante justice undermines the rule of law, no matter how deep the grief. Khan was arrested and later sentenced for the killing. Yet, in interviews, he remained unrepentant, stating that he had acted not for revenge, but from a father's love, a love that could not bear to see his daughter's killer walk free. This case stands as a haunting reminder of how loss and trauma can drive people to extremes, and how, in moments of unimaginable pain, the line between justice and vengeance can blur beyond recognition.